Hi, Tony from all the remote things again here today, and I've got Jutta Eckstein with me today. How are you today?
I'm great. Hey, Tony, it's really super to meet you. And of course, I would like to be in Australia, but it's really excellent to be here. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So, Jutta and I have met before. I had the lucky pleasure to interview you at Yao many years ago when you just sort of really Bossa Nova was taking off. But let me not steal your thunder. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. So I am a coach, consultant, speaker, and author. I'm based in Germany. I'm in the agile field, I guess, forever. So started 97 with extreme programming. So that was before the term agile was coined. So I explored extreme programming. Yeah, and since then I'm in that field on various topics. So things have changed for me. But yeah, I guess we are talking about those.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So a lot of people will know you for Bossa Nova, the book, and the method. But I want to go back a little bit further than that. So I like to do a little bit of research. So, and I'm going to own up the fact I'm going to read this because, but I found that you said you've been doing this for some time, but you wrote a book called Pedagogical Patterns and Advice for Educators some time ago. I thought it might be nice just to talk about where did that come from and how does that sort of phase into where you are now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, first of all, I didn't write that by myself. It's, if you will, a classic patterns book with many authors, because if we talk about patterns, it always means that they should be something people who are in the field are using and know about, maybe not by the name, but the patterns are about giving that name or providing a vocabulary. So I don't even remember how many people we were, I guess like 15 or so. So really great bunch of people. Yeah, and this actually is on the one hand related to where I'm coming from. So the first study that I also finished was for becoming a teacher, actually. So I studied pedagogy and psychology and didactic and methodologic. I'm not even sure if these are the right terms in English, because it's also long ago and I'm not practicing this, at least not in that field. However, but I've also done over all those years, so I, like probably a lot of us, so I've also been teaching and training and so on. And way back when the patterns came up, so the Gang of Four with the design patterns and so on, there was at first a tiny group thinking about, well, aren't there also patterns that we are using, so we are the people who are training and teachers and so on, that we are using and we find helpful, and wouldn't it be important to share those? And so we met various times and went to the different block conferences. That's the name of the pattern conferences at various places, and we improved those, and once they were in a state we felt like this is good, so we published those. However, that now might mean, well, this is back like in teacher stuff or something, but it was always at the time related mainly to object-oriented programming, or in general to programming. So it was in the field of software engineering.
Right, right. Yeah, it was interesting when I found it. I thought, oh, and the reason I found it was because I was looking for the title of the book so I'd been introduced to you many years ago as well, around 215 or 216, I think, around that period of time. You wrote a book with a good friend of both of us, obviously, Joanna Rothman. Shout out to Joanna, and I've had her on the channel, right? Which was diving for hidden treasures. That cost of delay in your project portfolio. And it was the first one I'd ever read that sort of made some sense around why we were having these problems in these project portfolios and things. Did you want to talk about that a little bit as well?
Yeah, well, that was kind of interesting. Well, Johanna and I, we know each other for quite some time, and then there was this one Agile conference, and we both were there with a similar topic on cost of delay, and we just figured about that, and then we shared like what is our take on that, and we found that, well, we have like additional perspectives, but the same conceptual idea about it. And then there was this also one thing that we felt, the Reinertsen book, which I really have to admit, I read it, and I also have to admit it's not an easy read.
It is not an
And
easy read. I agree with
yes,
you. I read it as well. Actually,
yeah,
I read
right.
it twice because the first time was hard, and I thought, oh, I think I need to read that again. But it wasn't any easier the second time, and I've had the pleasure of actually interviewing Don. I did tell him that as well. So
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, well, we both thought the information is so important, especially for what we are doing in the agile field, and like with the lean thinking and so on. But the book seems to be too difficult for a lot of people. Well, many people were referencing it, but not so many have really read it. And so we wanted to provide a way that's more pragmatic with like examples. So what does it really mean if you take flow seriously, and if you really look for your cost of delays in, we called it, I think, for your project portfolios, and then brought together these things that we are living in with our clients, and therefore making it, I believe, more tangible and yeah, more practical for many people.
Yeah, it seems like that you sort of went on a journey with that, because I read that one, and then recently you've re-released this book, so that's part of the reason we're going to get onto this. But you released the Agile Software Development with Distributed Teams, and I can see much of your earlier thinking folded into that. So you've just re-released it, so that's why I bring it up anyway. Have you updated it? Let's talk about that one.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I republished both that one, so the Agile Software Development with Distributed Teams, and also the one with In the Large, so which is about scaled agile. And the In the Large was actually the very first book that I wrote. That was in 2004. That's when I published it, and it was about scaling. And you can think about that in 2004, almost nobody was interested in scaling. Everyone was about, well, what is that agile stuff really? And so, yeah, it wasn't really spread wide. So it was way ahead of its time. And actually also for the distributed one, I had the impression it was also ahead of its time. I published it in 2010.
Definitely, yes.
And distribution wasn't like the huge topic at that time. It was for my clients, but well, I'm just like a one-person show here, and so it's not the mass market. Anyway, so first of all, my point there was, so I for many years tried to get back the copyrights, which I got back a few years ago, and then I was sitting with these books and the copyright and was wondering, well, it would be great to make an update, but then nothing happened. And so I realized I will probably not update it. So they would sit there forever. And so I just decided to republish them as they are. And yes, that might also perhaps provide a little bit of a historic perspective on it, because it's kind of from at that time. But on the other hand, what I also see that some of the things that I was writing about at the time, they seem to be more relevant again than kind of what has happened in between. Like there was quite some time where everything was so much about like, it really needs to be Scrum and it really needs to be this framework and that framework. But now that people have more experience with that, they often ask, well, isn't there anything else? So does it have to be a framework, and can't I adapt it to my own needs? And well, I would even say be really agile about the process that we are using here. And so this is more what both of the books are about. And well, maybe to kind of conclude there. So for me, I always wondered why those, for example, scaling agile approaches needed a different name. So why is there something that's called Safe or Nexus or Less or whatever it is? And they have good stuff that they provide as recommendations and advices. So I'm not talking about this, but for me, scaling and also distributed agile, it always is just agile. So I never understood why it needs a new name. It is still agile. And so that's maybe also a point, well, I hope I can bring across with those books, because they're more going back to, okay, if we are in this context, what does it mean if we still want to be agile? So if we are scaled up or if we are remote and we want to be agile, what does it mean? And so I'm more looking at the values, the principles, the practices, and maybe they are absolutely the same. Maybe there are differences. Maybe they have a different purpose. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I should stop. I can go on.
No, and I didn't stop you because I can't profess to having read the Agile Software Development in the large. But it is on my reading list, and after talking to you now, I will. However, I can say I have reread the Agile Software Distributed Teams one, because that was part of what led me to asking you to come onto the show as well. And what I would say is what I found in it is a lot of the things you were talking about are so relevant to today. So I think anybody who's listening to this, it's the old thing, have a read, because whilst there are some historical things there, and they're obviously fine, but there's history in that. But also a lot of the concepts and things you're talking about just translate even more now than they ever did. And particularly now that we have the technology to support those things that you're talking about.
That's true. Yeah.
We didn't have the technology back when you wrote that book, or when we were first doing what we call distributed teams, which is now remote or hybrid or whatever you want to call it.
That's true. Yeah. Well, and maybe I really would like to stress that, because that's, I think, the most important thing. And I hope we all learned about this now that everyone has been remote at one point in time, and most of the times in the past 2 years, everyone was by themselves, really. And I hope what nobody will forget is the importance of mutual respect. And this is, for me, often the key, what I see when people go distributed, remote, hybrid, whatever, that there are spaces that are treated differently than other spaces.
Yes.
For example, if there are like a few people together on one side, they're closer to each other, and they, well, ignore is maybe too strong a word, but still they don't treat the people with the same respect that are further away. And this is true for all kinds of things. It could be that the one further away has just like the technology that is there for connecting with them, or it is like those are closer to the headquarters than others. They are maybe on a different continent, and therefore there's not the mutual respect. And I still see that, and I still hope, with now knowing how it feels to be remote, that people are more aware of it.
Yeah, I was talking to a team last night, that very same thing. It's interesting you say that. I'm a little, maybe I'm a bit strong sometimes, but what I was saying to them last night is I don't like the word hybrid, because the minute you have somebody who's not in the room, who is on the other side of a screen, then you're all remote.
Absolutely.
It's just dependent on where you're remote. You're remote here and they're remote there, but you're remote to each other. So therefore, you have to apply the modems that you think about. And, this remote agility framework talks about that very thing about how do we respect people? How do we understand? How do we react so that everybody is included in the conversation? So
yes.
I absolutely agree. And I could see that in your book when I was reading it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll take a little little step now towards bossa nova, because that is the one that a lot of people will know you about, and maybe some people don't. So I want to give you an opportunity to sort of talk just quickly about where did it come from, how did you get the idea to write that book, and a little bit about what bossa nova is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so first, because otherwise I might forget, I have co-authored this with John Buck, and maybe also putting this right here. So John Buck is known very much in the field of sociocracy, and Bossa Nova is about company-wide agility. And what we have been seeing that, well, companies are trying to be agile, and sometimes it's because they see in their IT field that people are using that agile stuff and this seems to be successful, and can't we learn from it and put it everywhere? Sometimes it's because of, well, it's still a trend and a hype. Can't believe it. It's more than 20 years old, but it is still like that, right? And sometimes it's also a push from the software team saying, well, we could be way more successful if our ecosystem would be agile as well. So there are various drivers that we have been seeing with our clients why they want to be company-wide agile, really. So, and then this book is really, well, maybe it's similar to the other books we talked about. It's not really something completely new. We were looking what's out there and is supporting the same values and principles that we know from Agile, but on the organizational level. Because, well, in Agile, of course, we know about software. We know also about teams, but we don't know so much about strategy or about budgeting or I don't know, just very things, or a structure even. We don't even know much about how to structure teams of teams. So it's even that, but then leaving alone, like we have different business units and stuff like that. And there are areas or fields who know about that and are doing this for a long time. And there are fields who really share the same values and principles. And the ones we found were beyond budgeting, then open space, then sociocracy, and then there's agile. And if you have listened carefully, so the first letters, they mark the term bossa. So B for beyond budgeting, OS for open space, then the other S for sociocracy, and then the A for agile.
Oh, I actually didn't know that. So I learned something tonight, and I've read the book. There you go. It's interesting. I had occasion. I was speaking with Jutta. I'll have him on the show very, very shortly, and it does gel with me actually after a conversation with him. And I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying so. He was talking about the fact that beyond budgeting, the actual naming of that sort of gives the impression that it's just totally about funding, but it's really about, and when that book came about, we really didn't have that concept of business agility, and you were just talking about that in there, and the business agility folding into what you're talking about there. So it's very interesting in terms of that, and I think there was quite a number of people that you worked with on that, wasn't there? It was, if I'm not wrong,
true.
James Shaw.
I'm glad that you're saying this, that beyond budgeting is really more than about finance. And they often say that it's really more beyond command and control management. So offering a different management style. And because finance rules companies, a lot goes back to finance because that triggers how management is really happening.
Yes. Yeah, I know. It's something that you can't get away from. Like I see a lot of agile implementations as you have over the period of time. And again, I was talking to a group about this last night. You often see, let's just say consultancies have come in and they built a lovely development engine and they've got the agility running quite well. But what they haven't looked at is thought about, the governance the funding, and then they end up with this 3-speed type economy, and it all comes back to funding, and everybody says, well, funding's a bottleneck, but really you haven't thought about it in the terms of full business agility. So of course it is, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And well, and on the same line, open space for me, well, first of all, I assume a lot of people who are listening here, they know open space as a facilitation technique that's used for unconferences or bar camps or stuff like that. What we have in mind is more, again, well, it's using the values principles of open space on the organizational level, which means that the company is always inviting everyone to suggest, for example, a new product or new features or whatever it is. And it doesn't go through a difficult evaluation process, but it's just like it's out there. And like in an open space, so the facilitation technique, it is who, if there is a topic like that, a new product suggested, and there are enough people who think like, this is great, I want to work on this, then people will start working on it. You know, it's kind of driven by the passion of the people together with their responsibility of making what the company does better, and also helping the client, of course. And so it's really more perhaps a strategy, I would say, for on the organizational level. And yes, you can still use open space as a technique, but this is not so much what we have in mind here for the Bossa Nova or for company-wide agility.
Yeah, that's it's a brilliant mix when you think of those ones all put together and complementing each other. So, yeah, as I said, I had the occasion to reread it as along with talking to Beate and then piecing the pieces together. It was really interesting to see that. I want to take a few moments now just to talk about something that's passionate in your heart, and it folds back to stuff that we're really passionate with the remote agility framework, and that's sustainability and folding that into all of the kind of working. Talk to me a little bit about what you're doing with that and your thoughts on sustainability, because I know you're really passionate about that.
That is very true. And actually, it's absolutely related to the Bossa Nova because, well, I know most people look at the Bossa Nova stuff more into what is it about, and well, what are these 4 different streams like beyond budgeting and so on. However, there is a part 4 in the book, and the part 4 in the book says, well, if you manage to really kind of live that way and you have company-wide agility, you have to be aware that this comes with an expectation, and or maybe a promise. And maybe we can just leave it for now on the team level. So if a team says we are an agile team, and then somebody finds out that they are not inclusive, then people would say, well, I thought you're an agile team. So it comes with that kind of promise to take care of stuff and being responsible for stuff. And so what we also did in that part 4 of the Bossa Nova book, already looking into what kind of expectation is that, and the expectation actually goes in the direction of what's our responsibility for the ecology, sorry, for the social aspect, and for the economic aspect. And those 3 things together are actually the definition. Well, there are several, but one of the definitions that I like most about sustainability, it's called the triple bottom line. And it says like, well, we have to have a holistic view on sustainability in that way that we take into account the social aspect, that's the people who we are dealing with. So talking about diversity, inclusion, but it could also be about ending poverty. You know, it goes in all
Yes.
the directions. Then the environmental aspect, well, that's kind of easy. It's about saving the planet, looking at the carbon footprint and so on. And the third one is the economic aspect, which means also that the products that we are creating shouldn't do any harm. It also has that thing that, and this goes back to actually what we talked about, mutual respect and remote, that's also interesting, is about ensuring that everyone has a possibility to develop and grow no matter where they are. So it's for everyone everywhere. So this, and only if these things are coming together, we are really talking about sustainability, because it's so easy to just focus on one of these three areas at the cost of the others.
Yes. Yeah,
And
it's the point, isn't it? You can get out of kilter by just focusing on that and not thinking about that. We talk about that a lot with the remotability framework, is thinking about how we fold sustainability into everything that we do, because it is that balance, right?
exactly. And now the thing that I'm doing is actually two-sided. So one is what's called sustainability by Agile. So with all the tools and skills and whatever practices, experience that we have at hand in the Agile field, how can we help with these things, companies, or maybe even the sustainability sector, to be more successful? So it's just using Agile for that. So that's called sustainability by Agile. And then what I'm also looking into is what's called sustainability in Agile, which is more, well, looking at the products that we are creating. How much harm are they doing? What's the carbon footprint of the software that we are creating? What's happening with like our latest update? Are we creating with that maybe more e-waste because people have to throw out their old hardware because the new software doesn't run on it anymore? Or also in the direction of how inclusive are the products that we are creating? There, well, create in quotes examples where this is not the case. For example, asking at the user interface for a last name that has at least 3 characters, well, which it excludes a lot of people in Asia where they have only 2-character long last names, stuff like that. So are the products we are creating really sustainable? So that's the other part of it.
That's fantastic. Look, we're at the end of our time, and it's been wonderful to have you on here. I'd love to thank you for being on here and part of from behalf of All the Remote Things. How could people get in touch with you or contact you to get involved in any of these things, especially that sustainability type stuff that you do?
Yeah, sure. So the easiest is probably to reach me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. So it's just my first name, last name, Jutta Eckstein, nothing fancy, no fancy handle. So it should be easy to find me. Then my homepage is first character of my first name and then my last name all together. So it's jeckstein.com. And there, if you go directly to /sustainability, or you follow the menu where it says sustainability, there you find also some of the work that I've done so far. But this is really more or less has just started. So there's more to come.
Oh, Jutta, thank you so much for being on All the Remote Things today. It's been fantastic to have you. If you're listening to this and you're really enjoying it, don't forget, like, subscribe, amplify All the Remote Things for all things remote. Again, thank you, Jutta, for being on All the Remote Things.
Thank you for having me.